In 1933, 15 million Americans were out of work. 1 out of every 4. Banks closed, farms failed, and 4 million people left their homes and took to the road. They jumped freight trains in the dark. They slept in camps along the tracks called hobo jungles. They ate whatever they could find, steal, beg, or share. They left chalk marks on fences that only other hobos could read, secret symbols that said, "A kind woman lives here, a man with a gun, or food if you work for it." Number 14. On this list was cooked in a single pot by 6 men who each brought 1 stolen ingredient. Number 1 is a chalk mark on a fence post that meant a hungry man would eat tonight. Hit that subscribe button. Let us count down the 25 forgotten meals hobos ate during the Great Depression. Number 25. Water. Just water. From a creek, a horse trough, or a garden hose left running beside a farmhouse. Before anything else on this list, a man riding the rails needed water. The boxcars were hot in summer and freezing in winter, and neither condition was kind to a body that had not eaten since yesterday. Water was the first meal, the only meal on days when nothing else came through. Number 24. A raw potato from someone's garden, pulled from the dirt in the dark while the farmer slept, not peeled, not cooked, eaten like an apple, walking down the tracks with dirt still on your teeth. A raw potato has calories and starch and enough substance to keep a man moving until the next town. That was the math, not taste, not nutrition. Movement. Number 23. Bread and lard. A slice of bread spread with rendered pork fat. In a farmhouse kitchen in Vermont, a woman fed her family potatoes with hot lard poured over them. When a hobo knocked on the back door, he ate the same thing. Whatever the family had, the hobo had. That was the rule in houses where the chalk mark said this door was safe. Number 22. A sugar sandwich. 2 slices of white bread, spread with butter and a spoonful of granulated sugar. Children ate this for lunch. Hobos ate it on the road. It cost almost nothing, and it gave you enough energy to walk 5 miles to the next rail yard. A sugar sandwich is what poverty tastes like when you are 10 years old in Indiana in 1932. Number 21. Ketchup sandwich. Bread and ketchup. That was it. Ketchup was cheap, and it had tomatoes in it, and tomatoes had vitamins, and that was the closest thing to reasoning that a hungry man could manage. Mustard sandwiches, too. Anything that went on bread and made bread taste like something other than bread. The condiment sandwich was the meal of last resort for millions of Americans who still had a roof, but not much else. Number 20. Dandelion greens. Clara Cannucciari, who grew up during the Depression and later became famous on YouTube at 93 years old, said that dandelion greens were one of the most important foods her family ate. They were free, growing wild in every yard, field, and ditch across America. People washed them, boiled them, or ate them raw with vinegar and salt. A weed that kept people alive because nobody thought to charge money for it. Number 19. Bean soup from the back of the stove. Dried beans cost almost nothing. A pot of beans, simmered all day on a wood stove, fed a family of 8. When a hobo came to the door, the woman ladled a bowl and handed it out with a piece of bread. Bean soup was the backbone of Depression cooking because beans stored forever, cooked slowly, and stretched further than anything else in the pantry. Number 18. Fried cornmeal mush. Cornmeal boiled into a thick porridge, poured into a pan, cooled until solid, sliced, and fried in whatever fat was available. Eaten with molasses or syrup or nothing at all. Cornmeal mush was the meal that connected the Depression to every century before it. The same food that had fed settlers and soldiers and slaves was now feeding the unemployed in 1934. First pattern break. Hobos had their own alphabet, a secret code drawn in chalk on fence posts, walls, and back doors. Symbols only other hobos could read. A cat shape meant a kind woman lives here. A circle with 2 arrows meant get out fast. A cross meant talk about religion and you get a free meal. A shovel meant you will have to work for your food. And a zigzag line meant a man with a gun lives here. These symbols were drawn by men who could not always read or write, but who understood that the man coming after them was just as hungry. The marks were acts of generosity left by people who had nothing. The National Cryptologic Museum in Annapolis Junction has a collection, a secret language invented by starving men so that other starving men could eat. Number 17, potato soup. Water, potatoes, salt. Maybe an onion if you had one. Maybe a splash of milk if the cow was still giving. This was not a recipe. This was arithmetic. How many people can I feed with 3 potatoes and a pot of water? The answer was always more than you thought, because the alternative was not feeding them at all. Number 16, peanut butter bread. Flour, sugar, baking powder, milk, and peanut butter. No eggs, no yeast. Peanut butter cost 10 cents a pound in the 1930s. If you did not have milk, you used water. If you did not have sugar, you left it out. The bread came out dense, dark, and filling, and it kept a family going when real bread required ingredients that no one could afford. Number 15, rice pudding. Leftover rice, a little milk, a spoonful of sugar, and a pinch of cinnamon if the jar was not empty. Baked until the top browned. Rice pudding was dessert in a decade when dessert meant using leftovers instead of throwing them away. A mother who served rice pudding after a dinner of bean soup was telling her children that everything was going to be fine even when she was not sure it was. Number 14, Mulligan stew. The hobo meal, the one that defines the whole era. A description from the Sunday Oregonian in 1900 tells you everything. 5 or 6 hobos join in this. One builds a fire and rustles a can. Another has to procure meat. Another, potatoes. One fellow pledges himself to obtain bread, and still another has to furnish onions, salt, and pepper. If a chicken can be stolen, so much the better. The hobo who organized it was called the Mulligan mixer. The pot sat on the fire in the jungle camp, and every man put in what he had. Vegetables pulled from a garden, a pigeon caught by hand, beans traded for a day of work. Some men added loose tobacco for flavor. Some, according to one account, added lint from their clothing to make the broth thicker. Every night the stew was different because every night the ingredients were different. The only constant was the pot and the fire and the hunger that brought men to both. Number 13, mock chicken. Eggs scrambled with tomato and onion and butter, served cold on bread. They called it chicken because real chicken was too expensive. If you owned a chicken, you kept it alive for the eggs, because a live chicken fed you every day and a dead chicken fed you once. Mock chicken was imagination on a plate. You ate a scramble, you called it chicken, and you believed it, because believing was better than admitting what you could not afford. Number 12, depression cake. No eggs, no butter, no milk. The ingredients were flour, sugar, cocoa, baking soda, vegetable oil, vinegar, and water. The vinegar reacted with the baking soda, and the cake rose without eggs. Also called wacky cake, it was a chocolate cake baked from ingredients that cost almost nothing, by women who refused to let their children go without something sweet. Depression cake is still baked today by people who do not know where the recipe came from. It came from a kitchen where the butter dish was empty, and the mother baked anyway. Number 11, Hoover stew, named after the president who did nothing. Macaroni noodles, sliced hot dogs, canned corn, and canned tomatoes were boiled together in one pot and served in Hoovervilles, the shanty towns that bore his name. Hoover blankets were newspapers. Hoover hotels were cardboard boxes. Hoover flags were empty pockets turned inside out. And Hoover stew was the worst meal in America, served in the worst places in America, named after the man who let it happen. Second pattern break. 90% of the men who knocked on a back door during the Depression would not accept free food. They were too proud. They had lost their jobs, their homes, their savings, and their place in the world, but they had not lost the belief that a man should work for what he eats. So the women who answered those doors learned a trick. They invented work. One woman in a small town kept a woodpile in her backyard. When a hobo came, she told him she needed the wood moved closer to the house. When the next man came, she told him she needed it moved back. The pile never changed. The work was imaginary. But the men who moved it ate with their dignity intact. They sat on the back step with a bowl of soup and a slice of bread, and they had earned it. That mattered more than the food. In a country where 4 million people were on the road and 15 million were out of work, a woman with a woodpile and a pot of soup kept the idea alive that a man's labor still had value, even when the world said it did not. Number 10. Bread-lined soup. Thin broth with whatever vegetables the soup kitchen had that day. Served with one slice of bread, one bowl per person. The line stretched around the block. 15 million unemployed. And for many of them, this was the only meal of the day. Al Capone opened one of the first soup kitchens in Chicago. A gangster fed the city because the government would not. Number 9. A lard sandwich. Bread and lard. No meat. No vegetables. Just rendered animal fat spread on bread for the calories. Farm families in the South ate lard sandwiches 3 times a day when the crops failed, the store would not extend credit, and the only thing left in the pantry was a tin of lard and a half loaf of bread. Number 8. Peanut butter on anything. At 10 cents a pound, peanut butter was the cheapest protein in America. Spread on bread, on crackers, on leftover biscuits, or eaten straight from the jar with a spoon. Peanut butter kept more American children alive during the Depression than any government program, any breadline, any Hoover stew. That was the price of survival in 1933. Number 7. An EGG sandwich on toast from a farmhouse kitchen. A mother in Tyndall, Ohio, population 200, made egg sandwiches on toast with coffee for every hobo who knocked. Her son remembered it decades later. She never turned anyone away. There was a mark on their fence post, but nobody in the family ever found it. The hobos knew. They always knew which doors were safe, and they came back to those doors year after year. Number 6. Acorn coffee. Real coffee was a luxury during the Great Depression, so Americans roasted whatever they could find. They gathered acorns, dried, and ground them into a bitter brew. They roasted chicory root, baked it, and brewed it like coffee. C.W. Post sold postum, a powdered drink made from roasted wheat and molasses. Every substance imaginable became a substitute, because coffee was the one comfort people refused to give up, even when they could not afford it. Number 5. A stolen apple. From an orchard, from a stand, from a tree hanging over a fence. An apple in the pocket of a man riding a boxcar at night was worth everything, not because of the calories, but because it was sweet. Sweetness was rare on the rails. A man who had eaten nothing but bean soup and bread for a week bit into a stolen apple and tasted something that reminded him of a kitchen he used to have. Number 4. Linzensoepi, from a church basement. Churches fed the hungry when nobody else would. Lentil soup, thick, cheap, filling. A church lady with a 20-gallon pot, a bag of lentils, and a prayer could feed 100 men in an afternoon. Some churches asked for nothing. Some asked you to sit through a sermon first. The hobos who drew a cross on the fence post were telling the next man that religion was the price of supper, and it was worth paying. Third pattern break. A railroad bull in Yuma, Arizona knocked a hobo off a moving freight train in the dark. The next morning, he walked down to identify the body. It was his own son. The boy had left home to find work, and his father did not know he was riding the rails. That story was told in hobo jungles for years. The Depression did not just take jobs and money. It took fathers from sons and sons from fathers. A man who left home to find work and never came back was not a failure. He was 4 million men. Number 3, the community pot in the jungle. Not Mulligan stew, just the pot itself. The fire that somebody kept going. The understanding that if you had something, you put it in, and if you had nothing, you ate anyway. The jungle pot was the most honest expression of community in American history. No questions asked, no means testing, no forms to fill out. You were hungry? There was a pot. You ate. Somebody else would put something in tomorrow, or they would not, and you would eat anyway, because that was the deal. Number 2, the backdoor handout. A bowl of whatever the family was having, soup, beans, potatoes with lard, or a sandwich. It was handed through the back door to a man who stood on the step with his hat in his hands. The front door was for guests. The back door was for hobos. The women who answered it did not ask where you had come from, or where you were going, or what you had done. They handed you a bowl, they watched you eat, and when you were done, they took the bowl back, closed the door, and went back to feeding their own children, who were almost as hungry as you were. Number 1, the chalk mark on the fence. A kind woman lives here. That was the symbol. A small mark in chalk or pencil, drawn on a fence post, a gate, or a wall by a man who had just eaten his first meal in 2 days. He did not know the woman's name. She did not know his, but he left a mark so the next man would know. And the next man came, and he ate, and he left a mark too. A chain of hungry men stretched across the country, connected by chalk lines on wooden posts, each one saying the same thing: someone here will feed you. That was the most important meal of the Great Depression. Not the food, the knowledge that it existed, the mark that said you were not alone. A kind woman lives here. Every hobo in America knew what that meant, and the women who earned that mark never knew it was there. Tell me in the comments if your grandmother had a mark on her fence. Tell me if your grandfather rode the rails. Tell me if your mother made depression cake or sugar sandwiches or dandelion greens. Tell me what state and what year. The people who survived the Depression are almost gone now. The jungles are overgrown. The chalk marks have washed away. But the recipes are still here. And someone needs to tell them before the last person who remembers forgets.